Well, thank you, soon-to-be Senator Cruz. He mentioned during his speech, Leo Johnson, tonight, as we begin our program at the very beginning, the Family Research Council will be very proud to recognize his service and reward him and honor him tonight. So I know you would want to be a part of that. That is tonight. To honor Leo Johnson for, and others actually at FRC, for their role in saving lives. Well, yeah, that'll be tonight. American Values is another one of our original sponsors for the annual Values Voters Summit, led by President and founder Gary Bauer. Gary, as many of you know, Gary served on Ronald Reagan's administration as Undersecretary of Education and as the President's Chief Domestic Policy Advisor. He brought the Family Research Council into national prominence as president for 10 years. In 2000, Gary took his pro-family, pro-life message across the country and into the Republican presidential debates and primaries. Today, Gary Bauer continues to be one of the true champions of faith, family, and freedom through his national leadership with American Values. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the podium, Gary Bauer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Appreciate that a great deal. I've told you over the years this same thing. I'll tell you again. Ronald Reagan told me if you get a standing ovation when you've been introduced, you need to sit down immediately because you have nowhere to go but down after that. So I proceed at my own risk. Well, my friends, it's always good to see you all here in Washington, D.C., but as fate would have it, you're here this week during a very bad week for our country. I was just up in the hotel room watching the bodies of Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, arriving home to the country that they loved. The U.S. ambassador and the others were brutally murdered. As we talk and meet here this afternoon, U.S. embassies across the Middle East and in Northern Africa and now spreading to other parts of the world are under siege. A mob in Cairo is chanting at the gates, "Obama, Obama, we are all Osamas now." Ladies and gentlemen, the proper response to that mob is if you are all Osamas now, you will reach the same fate he did. Ladies and gentlemen, these events unfolding now, they're unnerving, but they're not unusual. Over the last 50 years, American embassies have been besieged time and time again by Islamic mobs in the same cities over and over again. These mobs can't bring us down, but what can lay us low is the weak, vapid response of our government that we have seen all this week. From the Oval Office to State Department bureaucrats, the message has been the same. We are told that an obscure anti-Islamic film is the cause of these riots. Some commentators have even called for the filmmaker to be in prison. If he is in prison, it's because he made a lousy film. The administration has issued statement after statement reassuring the Muslim world that we respect all faiths and believe in the denigration of none. Well, that's good news. I assume that means that sometime this week the administration will withdraw the Obamacare regulations trying to force the Catholic Church to violate their own teachings. We're being told that even though we are free men and women, we need to restrain our freedom, that we need to be very worried and careful about the psyche of Muslims around the world so that we don't irritate anyone. My friends, I still remember the day after 9/11. We hadn't even pulled the bodies out of the smoking wreckage yet. And Palestinian Muslims, people we had given billions of your tax dollars to, ran into the streets, shooting guns in the air, giving candy out to their children, celebrating our pain and suffering. I remember Daniel Pearl, the Wall Street Journal reporter. Maybe some media people might want to think about their dead colleague. Daniel Pearl, tormented and tortured on videotape, made to look into the camera and say over and over again, "I am a Jew, I am a Jew," before they decapitated him and sent the video of his severed head all over the Middle East as a recruiting tool. Don't tell me to worry about Muslim sensibilities. Those in our government making these arguments are empowering the mobs. We owe no apology to Islamists. Thousands of our sons and daughters have lost their legs, have lost their arms, have lost their lives liberating the Muslims of Iraq and Afghanistan. They paid the ultimate price. There have been more mosques built in the United States in the last 11 years since 9/11 than in any 11-year period in the history of this country, because here we respect all faiths, if only the countries we liberated treated the Christians and Jews that live in those countries as well as we treat American Muslims. Every time fanatics go on a rampage, shouting Allah Akbar, the talking heads and the learned university professors and our friends in the media tell us, well, that was caused by something the Pope said. Or no, that's that cartoonist. He shouldn't have done that. Oh, no, it's this film. Oh, it's this pastor down in Florida. No, some infidel touched the Quran. My friends, these are the excuses for the mobs. They are not the cause of the mobs. The cause of the mobs is radical Islam. It's the cancer growing in the middle of that faith. It's the mosque all over the world with radical imams teaching young Muslims that the only way they can be certain to get the favor of Allah is to either make the infidels submit or to kill them. That is what causes the riots and the mobs. Our response to this must be to defend militarily our country and our people, but just as importantly, it must be to intellectually defend Western civilization, Judeo-Christian civilization. When is the last time you heard anybody in this administration even say the words Judeo-Christian civilization? Now, that seems odd to me. Ronald Reagan used to talk about the West all the time. I've heard the president repeatedly defend the Muslim world, talk about the wonders of Muslim civilization. But there is a thing called Judeo-Christian civilization. It has been, and it is today, a force for good throughout the world. The founders put the central idea of our civilization right in the middle of the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, where it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and endowed by their Creator. Memo to the American Civil Liberties Union and these folks demonstrating outside the hotel. That's God, endowed by their Creator, with certain unalienable rights, among these the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the central idea of who we are. You know, for a lot of people on the left, those words are like fingernails on a chalkboard. Because you see, the left is increasingly radically secular. They don't even believe there's a God. So how can they accept the words of our founding fathers that God is the author of our liberty? Now, ladies and gentlemen, the God, the Creator in that paragraph is not just any God. I say this not meaning to offend anyone, but that is not the God of the Quran. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that is that there's countries all over the world that have been established on the perception that they are following the teachings of the Quran. And they are not pleasant places to live. They're not pleasant places to live for women. They're not pleasant places to live for religious minorities. They're not pleasant places to live if you want to follow freedom of conscience. Our founders were very learned men. As they went to Constitution Hall, they were reading the Torah and the New Testament, the Jewish and Christian scriptures. And there they found the concepts and the ideas that they used to undergird the idea of this civilization and of this country. When they wrote those words in the second paragraph, they were revolutionary words. People yearning for freedom have recited those words time and time again. Chinese students rebelling in China years ago in Tiananmen Square held up our Declaration of Independence as the Chinese army mowed them down in the streets. The words were revolutionary, but they were also ancient. They go all the way back to Genesis, where God said, where the scriptures say, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them." We don't even fully understand what that means, that all of us are created in the image of God. But we know this, that because that is true, whether you are rich or poor, black or white, whether you're a handicapped baby or an elderly person suffering with Alzheimer's, no matter how much money you've got in the back, no matter what the problem is you have physically or mentally, you have dignity and value and worth. That is the central idea of Western civilization. That is worth defending, and we should cower in front of anybody, nobody, that is challenging that idea. That creator in that paragraph is the God of Abraham, the God who said to Abraham, "He who blesses Israel I will bless. He who curses Israel I will curse." Our two nations, Israel and the United States, stand as the two strong pillars of Judeo-Christian civilization. It is not an accident that we are hated by the same enemies. It is not an accident that every week synagogues and churches are attacked around the world, bombed and set on fire without any emergency meeting at the United Nations and without a peep out of the State Department or from the Oval Office of the United States. Everywhere this civilization has advanced, it has brought with it freedom, tolerance, religious liberty, and the dignity and equality of women. I would say this week, watching events unfold and seeing how the media has handled these events. And look, I've been here for, longer than I would care to remember, 30, 35 years. I know many reporters, many of them are honorable, good, and decent people who actually try to be journalists. But my friends, this week, all too many reporters were acting like attack dogs for one political party. They were trying to somehow shift the blame for the events in the Middle East onto Mitt Romney? Are you serious? Are some questions in order? Is somebody in the media going to ask the president, how is it that a paper in London has reported that our embassies were warned 48 hours ahead of time that there were likely going to be attacks on 9/11? Why weren't those embassies reinforced? Is anybody going to ask the president why it is that he is repeatedly missing the morning meetings for the intelligence briefings? You know, I worked for Ronald Reagan for 8 years, and I used to tell audiences like this all over the country, you have no idea what a president does every day when the first thing he sees and the first thing he gets is the intelligence briefing giving him the threat assessment of all the threats facing this country around the world. It's why their hair turns prematurely gray. Americans would not be able to sleep again at night if they knew how many bullets we dodge every single day in America. It has been reported all over for the last 2 weeks that the president doesn't find time usually to go to the meetings because, as one of his defenders said, well, he reads the material and he's so smart, he really doesn't need to ask any questions about it. Can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, this week, if there was a week like this in the Bush administration, when embassies were being burned, when an ambassador was coming home in a casket, can you imagine if George Bush flew to Las Vegas to do a fundraiser? The media would be talking about it for the next 55 days. My friends, all this talk about the Middle East, and again, I want to reassure you, we will get through this. All this talk about the Middle East, I know this subject has been touched on a few times today, but it's so good, I got to touch on it too. All this talk about the Middle East reminds me of the Democratic Convention a couple weeks ago, where the Obama delegates, as you all probably saw and have certainly seen references to, took out of the platform of that historic party the only reference to God in the platform and the historic democratic commitment to the belief that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Now, some commentators have suggested, oh, come on, this is no big deal. This is inside the Beltway issue. These are people that care about the platform. Most people don't care about it. My friends, what happened there was incredibly important, not because it was a little platform dispute, but because what it tells you about the people gathered at that convention, the delegates selected by Barack Obama's campaign to run as his delegates all over America. That's why they're at that convention. There are powerful forces in the president's coalition that want to take the city of Jerusalem and divide it in half and give half of that holy city, which, by the way, Jews were living in when Washington, D.C. was still a swamp. They want to give half of that city to the people rioting in the streets on our television screen this week. President Obama himself has shown more anger, more emotion, more pounding of his fist at news that the Israeli government has built homes in Jerusalem for Israelis than he has ever shown at the news that Ahmadinejad, who denies one Holocaust while he promises another, has lied to the president and lied to the world about the nuclear weapons he is building. So yes, when they take Jerusalem out of the platform, it means something. They were sending a message. And then there's God getting booted out. Why is that not a big deal? I mean, really, the Obama delegates were following Obama because a year or so ago, the President of the United States, 3, 4, 5 times a row, this constitutional law scholar, quoted that second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence in a variety of speeches. Anybody want to guess what words he left out? Endowed by their Creator. Oh, I've had wise people in town say, oh, come on, Gary, you're not reading anything into that, are you? Yeah, I am. You see, because on the left, they believe that liberty comes from government. And because they plan on running government for a long time, those words, that it comes from God and that they can't take it away, drives them nuts. So they do these things in the platform, and guess what, folks? Some people notice. You know, American Jews have been loyal to the Democratic Party for years. The Democratic Party has a great history of supporting Israel. Harry Truman, the first national leader, world leader, to recognize the new modern nation of Israel after it was recreated. He told people later in the Oval Office he was King Cyrus, saving the Jews. That Democratic Party today has a leader that is the most anti-Israel president in the history of the United States. So Jewish Democrats started calling the campaign, what in the world is going on? Well, why would you do this? And then black pastors started calling the campaign, saying, look, I'm already having trouble getting my congregation to support the president in view of his position on same-sex marriage. Now you take God out of the platform? Folks, I'm not making this up. Black pastors all over America, we're monitoring it in the news. We're being quoted as saying, I called my representative right away. What is going on in my party? And so the poor mayor of Los Angeles, I believe it was sent out to the podium to try to clean up the mess. And we watched 3 votes in a row before they could put God and Jerusalem back in the platform. And folks, God and Jerusalem lost all 3 votes. I mean, the only reason that they got put back in the platform was that the mayor of Los Angeles does what that party does so well on voting. They cheated. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I was trying to think about what God's reaction is to all this. I mean, you know, I don't think he was sitting on the edge of his throne, you know, like, oh my gosh, I lost that first vote. Oh, good, they're going to vote again. Oh, geez, I lost it. It's not fair. I didn't have a chance to get my people together. They're all at the other party's convention anyway. No, I don't think he had anything to worry about. Not the God that hung the stars in the sky and has named every one of them. Knows every delegate of the Democratic Party, knows them all, has counted the hairs on their head. Knows when a sparrow falls to the ground, when a great nation rises or falls. God doesn't have anything to worry about. But I tell you this, if I were God, I wouldn't want to be in a platform that so proudly, completely, totally, aggressively embraces the destruction of over 1.2 million of his creation, innocent, unborn babies every year in this country. You know, ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Party of recent decades kind of changed their position a little. They said they wanted abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. It was an interesting rhetorical thing to say. It at least sent a signal that abortion wasn't something to be happy about. I mean, the other constitutional rights, right? You'd never say the freedom of speech, you want it to be rare, or the freedom of religion should be rare. But they say this is a constitutional right, and they said for decades, well, it should be rare. You know what? They took rare out. They took rare out 4 years ago. It remained out this year. Nobody even noticed that. This party is proud. The party that for decades said it represented the little guy is allowing the slaughter of the littlest guys of all. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. So, my friends, I've got so much more I could say, but look, I'm going to make a prediction. We're going to vote in a little over 50 days. It's going to be a close election. There'll be a lot of people to vote for the president. There's a lot of people out now around America who depend on checks from their fellow taxpayers being in the mailbox every day. They will turn out in massive numbers. But so will the entrepreneurs, the small businessmen and women, the military families, the soldiers in harm's way, millions of Americans that want hope again, millions of Americans who want their children to be able to get out of the house and get their jobs and start their lives. They're going to vote too. And my prediction is that after all the votes are counted, even the dead votes of Democrats in Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, I predict that we will win, that this national nightmare will be over, and that America will finally be on the road to recovery. God bless you, and thank you very much.